Let me make it clear that I'm fully aware that none of you have eaten dinner yet. And perhaps I alone stand between you and dinner at this point, so I will try to be brief. It will be hard for me to discuss the next 50 years without some reflection on the previous 50, so please bear with me. I happen to be born and raised in New York City, and I was born the same week that NASA was founded. So within a day or two, I am the same age as NASA. And I feel the age sometimes on this. And that meant my earliest awareness of the world took place in the 1960s. Of course, the Apollo era of space was unfolding in the 1960s. However, as we all remember, and if you're too young to remember, you have surely read, that was a particularly turbulent decade, internationally and especially within the borders of America. We were at war in Southeast Asia. There was a civil rights movement. There were assassinations. And there was NASA on their way to the moon. And there was I, as a young child, with ambitions of one day becoming an astrophysicist. And I looked at the NASA program at the time, and it was clear that the astronauts, whatever criterion were used to select the astronauts, would have never included me. The shading of my skin was a little darker than what they were looking for at the time. Not only that, they were all drawn from the military, all but two of them. Those two, if you did not know, one of which was Neil Armstrong. The other was an astronaut, the only scientist to go to the moon, geologist. And you ask, well, which mission was he on? A scientist to go to the moon, he was on the last mission to the moon, Apollo 17. Well, perhaps the most turbulent year of that decade was 1968. Yet that's the year that Apollo 8, which goes unremembered by many people, because no, they did not land on the moon. There were no famous first words. But Apollo 8 was the first craft ever to leave Earth orbit, low Earth orbit. It's the first craft to go to the moon, Apollo 8. It went into a single figure 8 orbit and then came back. Now, what's important about that journey took place in December, the end of a very bloody, turbulent year. That's when the most famous photograph ever taken was taken. The most recognized photograph in the history of the world was snapped in Apollo 8. As they went behind the moon, they pulled out the camera, looked through the window of the command module, and there is Earth rising over the lunar landscape. That image has since, of course, been titled Earthrise. Was the first time we've ever seen Earth as a cosmic object from the surface of some other cosmic object. It was simultaneously thrilling and humbling. It was beautiful and a little bit scary, as our first voyage beyond low Earth orbit. By the way, of course, the moon is tidally locked to Earth, so from the near side of the moon, the Earth never rises. It's always there in the sky. So the title of that photo is a little misleading. People think that Earth rises on the moon, rises and sets on the moon the way the moon rises and sets on Earth, and that's just not the case. Well, you all know that, of course. But I urge you to spread that information to others who may be deceived by the title of that photo. I'll make another important point, to which I'll return in a moment, that the 1960s, which we all remember as the journeys of astronauts, Soviet and American astronauts, had its share of robotic missions. The first rover on the moon was a Russian rover. America had launched Ranger 7, photographed the surface of the moon. But those go unremembered by the public, even though they were our first robotic forays into space. They went unremembered because there was a much bigger story to be told. Because one of our human emissaries were doing the exploring. There was a vicarious attachment to what was going on that frontier, shared with us by astronauts on that frontier. Now, something I took for granted growing up in America is that by and large everybody thinks about tomorrow, or next year, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. It's almost a pastime. You speak to someone, what are you up to? They're not going to tell you what they're doing today. They're going to tell you what they're planning for in the coming years. Well, I'm saving because I'm going to go on this trip. Oh, we're going to put a new addition on the house. We're going to buy a bigger house. Or I'm going to get a new job, and we're going to have 3 more kids. Or whatever. There's a certain future viewing that goes on. America's not alone in this, of course. It's not. But I've visited too many countries where you speak to people and they're not thinking about the future. And any time you find out that they're not thinking about the future, sure enough, that is not a country with a space program or with any kind of space connectivity at all. And I've come to learn that space is a frontier that keeps you dreaming about what might get discovered tomorrow. And you know something? That's a fundamental part, as far as I'm concerned, and I bet as far as you're concerned as well. That's a fundamental part of what it is to be human. If you look through culture around the world and through time, every culture you find, even cultures that did not have written language, cultures where all you know of them are from the stories passed on from one generation to the next. Every one of them has some story, accounting, mythologically or otherwise, for why they are there and what is their place in the universe. It's not a new question. It's not a new quest. It's an old question. It's an old quest. And it's been hypothesized, I didn't do the research on this, but it's completely plausible, that if you look in the animal kingdom, humans are one of the few, if not only, animals who are perfectly happy sleeping on our backs. And we sleep at night. Well, what happens if you sleep at night on your back and you wake up? You see the stars. The stars. We may be uniquely curious about the stars in the history of life. So perhaps we shouldn't be surprised that we wonder, what is our place in this cosmos? Now, we think of space exploration as, you got a place to go, let's go there. The moon, Mars. The 20th century, of course, is the first century where the methods and tools of science, and particularly the methods and tools of space exploration, have enabled answers not drawn from mythological sources. Answers to the questions of where do we come from? Where are we going? What is our place in the universe? And much of this came about not because we simply went to the moon or went someplace, but space has given us vistas, places to stand or to float, to drink in all that the universe can tell us. Information that doesn't reach Earth's surface. Ultraviolet light, X-rays, gamma rays. We would know nothing of black holes were it not for telescopes launched above Earth's surface. We would know nothing of various explosions in the universe that are very rich in X-rays. We would know there's so much that is blocked by our atmosphere that we normally think of as transparent. Blocked, interfered with by our atmosphere, that one could almost declare that we're practically blind without having vistas in space on which to conduct these studies. And so when I think of space exploration tomorrow, I don't think of low Earth orbit. In fact, let me be a little biased and say, to me, that's no longer space. It was in the 1960s when it was a frontier just to reach low Earth orbit. Sure, but now that's routine. It can still be dangerous, but it's not a frontier. It's not a space frontier. Take me somewhere new. Do something more than drive around the block. And it turns out, yes, the moon is a destination, Mars is a destination. The Lagrangian points, where you have the balance of gravitational forces and the centrifugal forces of the rotating system, those are destinations. You can build things there. We've got experience now building things. We've got a space station that got built. The largest built thing ever in space. Bigger than most things we've ever built on Earth. We've got experience. We could, of course, even use more. Now, in the United States, there's certain things that, well, let me give my personal story. I take for granted. Let's ask the question, what is culture? What is culture? And everybody's got an explanation for it, I know. But I want to give you one of my own. To me, culture is all the things you do as a nation that you no longer pay attention to because you take it for granted. That's culture. That's culture. So, for example, I live in Manhattan. I no longer notice when I walk past a 70-story building. But every tourist from every place in the world who comes to Manhattan is looking up. And so then I said, well, what do other countries take for granted? Some things are simple things, like last time I visited Italy, I went to the grocery store. There was an entire aisle of pasta. I've never seen that before. Pastas pasta shapes that never make it to the United States. And I went to my Italian friends and I said, do you notice this? And they said, no, that's just the pasta aisle. And so I said, well, what's in our grocery stores in America that I no longer notice? I had to ask somebody else. Because if it's my culture, I'm not going to notice. They noticed you have an entire aisle of ready-to-eat breakfast cereals. So to me, that's just the cereal aisle. We have entire aisles of soft drinks. Coke and Pepsi and their derivative products. Isn't it actually both sides of an aisle? That's just the soda aisle to me. Nobody else has that. You visit the Far East, whole aisles of rice. Choices undreamt of in America. And so, where am I going with these examples? In America, you go to the store, there are things made out of icons from the space program. You can buy refrigerator magnets in the shape of the Hubble telescope. You can buy boxes of Band-Aids sitting next to boxes of Band-Aids that have Spider-Man on it and Superman and Barbie doll Band-Aids, and the one next to that has stars, moons, and planets that glow in the dark. Little things like that I no longer take notice of. This is just the space product, the space-influenced products available for sale in America. Several years ago, I served on the Aerospace Commission, a commission to analyze the future of the American aerospace industry, which was falling on very hard times, in part because of the success of Airbus, for example. But so we went around the world to explore what is the economic climate in which the American industries are functioning, so that we could advise Congress and the industry about how to restore the state of competitiveness that they once perhaps took for granted. And in this effort, the aerospace industry, so emphasis on space, at least for my next several comments. So we went to various places, Belgium and France and England, all over. We worked our way east, and our last stop was Moscow. And like so many other Americans, I know English and few other languages, and I'm not proud of that fact. Please forgive me. But in England, I speak English. It's reported to be the same language in both America and England. Some will doubt that. But I have to tell you this. We went to Moscow. Not only do I not know Russian, I don't know the Cyrillic alphabet. I can't pronounce Russian words. I don't know how to pronounce those characters. I'm born in the Bronx, New York. You can't get much farther away, culturally, from Moscow, from where I came from. Yet, one of the places we visited was Star City. There's a shrine to Yuri Gagarin there. We visited the head of the complex there. After the morning vodka was served, he just sat back, loosened his tie, and we just started talking space through interpreters. And there was a gleam in his eye, and there was a gleam in our eye, and I felt the connection that I did not feel in England, or in France, or in Belgium, or in Italy, or in Spain. And I said, what is this connection coming from? It's not the language. Of course, it came from the fact that we were two nations that directed resources to put people into space. And the fact of having done that worked its way into our culture, so that we don't even know of life without it. And so I enjoyed a camaraderie that made me wonder, suppose the whole world engaged in this kind of enterprise. We would then be connected with each other on a higher plane, beyond national borders, beyond wars, beyond economic conflicts. For a while there, I was wondering, how could it be that two nations that share such deep common dreams about our presence in space could have ever been adversaries for so long in the post-World War II era? I have just a few more points that I'd like to make. This thing about space entering popular culture. I don't know how big the news was here, but it was really big news in America when the announcement was made that we might not fix the Hubble telescope in its next servicing mission, that it would be retired from service. Do you know who the biggest voices were to reverse that decision? It was not the astrophysicists. It was some among us who thought that. It was not the astrophysicists. It was the public. Why? Because they were receiving these beautiful images from the Hubble telescope, and it was the screensaver on their computers. And they became a participant in cosmic discovery. And when you're a participant, it's your life. It's what you do. You know that other people are doing it, but you are a vicarious participant in that enterprise. There were op-eds, letters to the editor, talk shows taking up the subject, debates in Congress, and in the end, the funding was restored. The public had taken ownership of the Hubble telescope. I don't know any point in the history of science where the public took ownership of any scientific instrument at all. But it happened then and there. And I assert for you that that's a measure of when something has reached culture. Now, I'm going to leave you with some thoughts that I first published about 10 years ago. For me, they're simultaneously disturbing but enlightening. I was writing a chapter for a book called The Columbian History of the 20th Century. And the chapter subject that I was to write on was called Paths to Discovery. And I said, okay, I'm going to see what the next 100 years will bring and look at all the ways to make discoveries. What drives discovery in this world? And so I looked back through time and made a list of the most expensive projects ever undertaken by human civilization. And I wanted to find out what drove the expenditure of that money. Then I could fill an entire chapter of all the ways you can undertake major ambitious projects. And it'd be a checklist. So I want to accomplish this, let's do that. Well, I made the list. What's on the list? The pyramids of Egypt, the Great Wall of China, major expenditures of human and financial capital. Great Wall of China, the Manhattan Project that led to the first atomic bombs, the great voyages of the 15th and 16th centuries, Columbus, Magellan, major expenditures. And I said, well, what do they have in common? There were only three things that they all had in common. One of these three things, not 10, not 20, not 50, 3 and only 3. The most powerful among them was war. There's always money when you're at war. Yes, we can call it defense. I want to be more polite about it, but in the end, it's war. Another one was the promise of economic return. And the third one, much less common today, but was very common back then, was the praise of royalty or deity. That's what got the pyramids built. That's what got the cathedrals built throughout Europe. And so I thought to myself, if we're going to go to Mars, or if we're going to take on some ambitious space project, are there cues from the history of human expenditure of cash? I think there are. Unless we're going to tell ourselves that we are fundamentally different kinds of human beings today that have ever preceded us in the history of civilization, I'm going to assert for you, and I wish this were not true, but I'm sharing with you my read of the record, that if you want to do something big and expensive, it's going to have to satisfy one of those three criteria. Otherwise, it's simply not going to happen. You'll be dreaming that it will happen, or it'll happen for a few years. What happens is expensive things take time to raise money for, take time to execute, and that baseline of time is longer than economic cycles. It's longer than political cycles. So whatever alignment of money and politics you can garner, it's got to survive downturns in both of those. And there aren't many things that can do that. Yes, there's a funding radar under which you can always fund things. In America, that funding level is about $1 billion, a couple of billion. Hubble was launched at $1.5 billion. You can do that. Different countries will have different thresholds for this, of course. CERN comes in a few $1 billion. Okay? Now, and I'm almost done, by the way. I know where everybody's hungry. Plus, I think we have a Q&A section here, part after I'm done. But, so there it is. And so I asked myself, I don't want to go into space because of war. That's just stupid. Well, what does that leave? That leaves the promise of economic return. And there I part ways a little bit with our distinguished guest, Mr. Gibson. One of the most unlimited sources of money to do things is in the form of entertainment. Tourism. Look at how much money people spend at amusement parks just to experience 3 Gs in the roller coaster. If they're wealthy, they'll want 3 Gs in space. Without an economic driver, there is no buoyant force to turn a space program into a space industry. So I worry about that. Oh, wait a minute, there's another thing. It's not war, but we can call it defense. How about that asteroid that's headed our way? One problem I have with only looking at Earth, with all our Earth monitoring satellites, is that while you're looking at Earth, an asteroid's coming up behind you. You got to point some of those satellites the other way. There's a greenhouse effect going on Earth. I got to look at Venus. Somebody ought to be looking at Venus, which has a runaway greenhouse effect, 500 degrees Celsius. Somebody better find out what knob got turned on Venus to end up the way it is. Mars used to have running water. It's bone dry today. Somebody better look to find out what happened to the water on Mars. Comets pass and cross Earth's orbit. Somebody better monitor that. The debris left over rains down on Earth and can take out our communication satellites. It's not only looking at Earth. We are not an island isolated from the cosmos. We are a participant in the cosmos. And let me leave you with the following thought. To deflect an asteroid that might be headed our way, and there's one headed our way, by the way, named Apophis. Google it, you'll find out when and where it might hit. And it will hit within the next 50 years, so it counts as the next 50 years in this presentation. Apophis, named for the Egyptian god of death and darkness. Named, of course, after it was determined that its orbit was crossing Earth's orbit, not before. We did not name that one Bambi, all right? You can name asteroids anything you want. That one got the right name. It's scheduled a 1 in 45,000 chance of hitting the Pacific Ocean on April 13th, 2036, with a close approach on Friday the 13th in April in the year 2029, where this 300-meter asteroid will come closer to Earth than our orbiting communication satellites. It'll be the biggest, closest thing ever to come in recorded history, and prime viewing is Northern Europe as you witness this shot across our bow, sent by the universe. Let me say that I will never forget the common resonant feeling I had sitting in the room with these members of the Russian space community. And all I can think of is if the whole world had that same shared experience. Then we can have common dreams and you get everybody thinking about tomorrow. And if everybody thinks about tomorrow, then we can all visit the sky together. Thank you for your attention.